Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Asia Dalton, and I'm a faculty member in the Department of Forestry. And it is my joy and my honor today to introduce our guest speaker, Bruce Ross. A native of Detroit, Michigan, Bruce found his love for nature early when retreating to the city's famed Belle Isle as a place of solace. He was encouraged by an educator to pursue an education in natural resources. He used this motivation to chart his career path and his educational path through high school and into college, where he later enrolled at Wayne State University in Detroit. At Wayne State, Bruce studied therapeutic recreation and parks and recreation management, earning a dual bachelor's degree from the university. Over the length of his career, Bruce has had myriad opportunities both to engage in the natural resources across the state of Michigan and to encourage urban youth to do the same. He was part of the team that began or started the state's Summer Youth Employment Program, and he subsequently served as field coordinator for Michigan DNR. In that role, Bruce was the chief manager of all state parks and was the first African American to serve in that position. Now he has the continued honor of continuing to work and live in his passions of creating opportunities for urban youth to engage with natural resources. As the founder and president of Ross and Contemporaries LLC, Bruce continues to provide opportunities from urban youth across the state to interact with natural resources, both in cities and in natural areas. Without further ado, I'd like to ask for your help and welcoming Bruce Ross to our seminar this afternoon.
Dr. Dalton, thank you so much for that introduction. And it is my pleasure and my passion this afternoon to share my passion with you is getting that apple off the tree, career pathways, and increasing diversity in natural resources. And I want to let everyone know that this is not a photo op opportunity for me, nor is this a game to me. You know, I work with kids every single day, especially during COVID. I work with kids, and it's been a tough time for our kids right now, you know, with COVID and all the things going on. But the one thing that I've noticed that kids really enjoy being outdoors and getting to know about the various careers in the outdoors. So I just want to welcome you and thank you for being my guest this afternoon. I get asked this question every single day. My kids ask me the question. A lot of the parents ask me this question. Why do you do what you do? Why do I do what I do? Well, I'll tell you, it's been a journey for me. And when I started off at Wayne State University, I was the only African-American male in my class. And it got lonely sometimes, and I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me. So I was on a mission that I want to increase diversity in the natural resources from a career perspective, but also I want to increase diversity in terms of our stewards of our natural resources. Now, I know the world's not perfect, and I know that I can't get everyone involved in natural resources from a career perspective, but we can have more stewards out here. And that's one thing that I do. I get more kids to embrace nature, embrace wildlife, embrace insects, embrace trees and all that good stuff. But the other thing that's very important to me, and I notice when I'm trying to get that apple off the tree, a lot of our young people are scared of nature. They have a fear of insects. They have a fear of animals. They have a fear sometimes of even trees. And I know when the first time I took some kids out camping, some of the kids had an issue with that. You know, like, oh man, it's nighttime. I'm a little scared of this. But I kept gradually getting them involved and educating them about, you know, camping, the wonders of camping, the wonders of the outdoors. But the other thing too that's very, very important to me, I know when I was growing up, I was kind of bullied at time, and people looked at me like, you know, you're involved in natural resources, and you know, my ego was kind of down. But what I try to do with my kids, I want to give them the belief that the impossible is possible. Every story has a beginning. And in this photo here is my two brothers, Bennett and Kenneth, and that's me in the middle. My mother always had it suited down. But my shero is my mother. And that's my mother in the center there. And my mother always inspired me. And I remember my mom, she used to go to the library. She used to collect books for me about nature and the environment. She used to save her little pennies, and she used to go buy me books, and she would always encourage me. I know I used to bring snakes in the house. I used to bring insects in the house. I used to bring all kind of things in the house. But mom, you always let me take it to the basement. And she says, keep it down there. Don't bring it upstairs. I know one time one of my snakes got out one time. My dad, like they had a fit. My mom said, you better put that thing back in the basement. But I have to say, growing up in Detroit, that's where I grew up in. I grew up in Detroit. And my mom was always encouraging me. I was in the neighborhoods, in the vacant lots, doing something in the vacant lots. I was riding my bike to Palmer Park. I was riding my bike to Belle Isle. And my mom was always there. And my mom always told me that you could be the first one in the family to go to college and graduate from college. And she kept inspiring me. And actually, I was the first one in my family to go to college and actually graduate. Another one of my heroes, and he is my hero to this day, is George Washington Carver. And as I mentioned earlier, I was bullied when I was a kid. People thought I was different. I was always collecting insects, or I had a frog with me or something. And when I would go out to Belle Isle, or I was in those little vacant lots around my neighborhood, I always pretend like George Washington Carver was with me and he was talking to me. And this photo right here, I have to thank a gentleman. Unfortunately, he passed late last year from COVID, Mr. Charles Ellis. And Mr. Ellis remembers when George Washington Carver came to his community near Alabama back in the mid-30s. And this is a photo that his pastor took of George Washington Carver. And he was telling the sharecroppers that, look what you're doing to the soil. They were growing cotton. And he's holding up this dirt and he's showing them what, happened to the soil because they were taken away from the soil. And, George Washington Carver was more than just the peanut. Everyone says Mr. Carver's a peanut. Oh, no, he's soybeans, you name it, he was doing it. And he actually had a great partnership with Henry Ford. Henry Ford really loved George Washington Carver, and Carver was working with him with natural components to vehicles. But one of the things I will say, too, I dress up like George Washington Carver when I'm with my young people. And I pretend like I'm George Washington Carver. And, if anyone's going to have a hero, he's definitely one to have. My inspiration today is the young people that I work with every single day. And when I look at these young people, when they go from being scared of nature and embracing nature, but I want to thank Justin Kunkel here in this photo is with some kids from the Greening of Detroit. And this is about 3 years ago when the kids came to the campus of Michigan State University. They actually toured the campus, had an opportunity to talk to other students, had an opportunity to meet some professors and participate in some different programs. And Justin had some different models set up for the kids. But I really, really like this photo of the Greening of Detroit kids where they were actually making paper. And the amazing look on their face when this was all done that, hey, I accomplished something. But ladies and gentlemen, I have a little statement here. And if you learn anything or take anything away from my presentation today, is what I'm going to read here real short here. There is a prosthetic for a lost arm or a leg, but there is no prosthetic for a lost soul or lost hope. And I get emotional because a lot of the kids that I work with are told that they're nothing and told that they can't do anything. And you want to break a kid's heart or steal their hope, keep doing that. And one of the things that I do every single day is I build hope. I build hope for a lot of lost souls. Because right now with COVID and all this stuff going on, these kids are enduring things that we never had to endure. And that's why anyone out there who work with kids, be very, very, very careful how you deal with kids and how you talk to them. Because kids are, dealing with a whole lot these days, and we need to build them up instead of tearing them down. I'm all about developing that apple off that tree. But before I can develop that apple off the tree, I have to plant that seed by building them up and building trust. And I'm going to give you a perfect example of building trust and building up. A program that I helped to develop with the DNR is called the Natural Resources Career Pathways Program. We allow students to explore their future. And I want to thank Kevin Fraley with the DNR and a few other folks with the DNR to help put this program together. And what we do, we bring high school students to the RAM Conference Center, the RAM Education Center in Roscommon, Michigan, where the students can join other professionals from the DNR for a 5-day career experience, where they learn about different careers in fisheries and wildlife management, forestry, conservation, how to be a conservation officer and a park ranger. One of the things I thought was important that we had kids from all over the state that came there. It wasn't just kids from urban areas, it was kids from all over the state. But I had a young man, if you can see this photo here in the middle there, I had this young man who was terrified of police officers. Now, the ages that we were bringing kids up for this program was 16 to 18. He was 14 years old. But I said he really had to be there because I was really worried about him. So before we implemented the program with the conservation officers, the two conservation officers in that photo there, I pulled them off to the side and I said, I really need you to really reach out to this young man. Let him know that you're human too. And folks, we know what's going around in this nation right now. Police officers and people of color. And I can tell you, I've had my run-ins with the police. But one of the things I learned from my mom is that not everybody is bad. Okay, there's good and bad in everyone. But I wanted this young man, not to paint everyone with a broad brush. And what I really like, one of the conservation officers, a gentleman on the right-hand side here, and he's kind of got his finger up to his nose. He got really emotional when I told him this young man was scared of him. And basically, he went up to the young man, he introduced himself to him, and he told him he likes to fish, and the young man like, oh yeah, I like to fish. I like to hike. He said, well, I like to hike. He said, what kind of music you like? And then when he was talking all about the rap music that he liked, this young man really, really got into it. They were building that trust. And I like what the conservation officer told him. He said, you never have to fear me. I would never do anything to hurt you. And the young man came back to me and he said, well, Mr. Ross, man, that conservation officer, he's a person too. I said, yeah, just like you. But what I thought was really nice when the program was over, the conservation officer actually shared some information with this young man, and they've been kind of staying in contact. And this young man right now, he's interested in being a wildlife biologist or a conservation officer. That's why I think it's so important that we build trust, but we also build each other up while we're building that trust. Making the connection to our greatest natural resources, our young people. I really love this photo right here, the young kids here, and this is near Warren Dunes, and they're looking across at Lake Michigan, and they thought it was an ocean. And when you tell them, hey, this is right in your state. One of the things I need to let everyone know that when you're making these connections, teamwork makes the dream work. And always remember that teamwork makes the dream work. I can't do the work that I'm doing right now without some amazing people and an amazing team. Just give you some examples here. I work with faith-based organizations like churches. I have a real great relationship with Galilee Missionary Baptist Church, Reverend Untitled Chapter and Deacon Mike Carter, who I work very closely with. We've actually done a few programs there where we kids learn about archery, kids learn about invasive species, Phragmites, the whole thing here. And I've actually had the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, Ron Olson, who is the chief of the Parks and Recreation Division. I actually invited him to come down and meet with them, with the church and the pastor and the deacon board there, and he's developed a relationship with them. Another organizations that I work very, very closely with is those in the trenches agencies. I work very closely with the Green Door Initiative, ran by Donnell Wilkins. I work very closely with the Youth Connection, ran by Dr. Grenade Dudley. One of my favorite sheroes is Mariah Adams Lawton of Healthy Kids, Inc. And I'm going to talk about a program that we work together on with Healthy Kids, Inc. Nonprofit organizations and schools. And I'm going to talk about a partnership that I have with the Greenfield Elementary School out of Detroit. Neighborhood groups. I'm going to talk about a program that I implemented on my old street called the Land Street Project. And that was really inspired by one of my mother's friends. My mom passed on a few years ago. But one of her friends says, Mr. Ross, you need to come back in this neighborhood and reach these kids because we're losing them. And like Johnny Appleseed, I plant seeds every single day, and I will travel to young people and their families. It doesn't matter how far I need to go, but I will travel anywhere to work with these young people and their families. You know, before I program, I build that child up, but I learn that child. And I learned from one of my mentors, Geraldine Jackson from Detroit Recreation Department. She used to tell us this all the time. And the older I got, the more seasoned I became in this field, is how are you going to program for a child or anyone and you don't even know them? That's why I make it a rule. Before I just set out programs, and I think everyone remembers this movie called A Field of Dreams. I love that movie, A Field of Dreams. Build it and they will come. But I take it a step forward, a little forward here. You know, I learn that child, I ask them, get them a part of it, I build it, and then I hope that they do come. One of the things that I do every single day, because some of the kids that I work with, and I'm not going to paint a broad brush, not all the kids that I work with, have, low self-esteem, but some of the kids I work with do have low self-esteem and been told that they're nothing. And when you have someone constantly beating you over the head, telling you you're nothing, what happens? You start to believe that you're nothing. And one of the things that I do when I get the chance to meet my kids and know my kids, I hand them things and I give them slogans to really build them up. And it's really funny, people say, well, Bruce, do you give these to the little kids? No, I give them to my older kids, my 18, 19, 20-year-old. They're kids to me because I'm 57 years old. They're kids to me. But this is one of the slogans that I give one of my kids or my kids, in case no one has told you lately. You, yes, you are amazing. You're strong. You're brave. You're wonderful. You're kind. You're loved. You're worthy. There's no one like you. The world needs you. And I'll just tell you this, ladies and gentlemen out there, I wear my emotions on my sleeve because, like I said earlier, this is not a game to me. I deal in flesh and blood every day. And I see these kids, and it's really touching. But it means so much to me that I have to build these kids up and show them that someone actually cares about them. Another slogan that I give the kids is, you're a work of art. Not everyone will understand you, but the ones who do will never forget about. The other thing that I do too, and this is all building my kids up. It's all building my kids up that when I really start doing programming with them, is I give them books or I read books to them. And I make sure that the books I give my kids or read to my kids, that the kids in this book look like them. There's a beautiful book by Michael Waters and Keisha Morris called For Beautiful Black Boys Who Believe in a Better World. And when my kids read this book and they say, Mr. Ross, man, this is a great book, man. It's about being in a better world, and I'm a part of this world. And I say, yeah, because you're the greatest natural resources that we have. My females that I work with too, it's just so much pressure out here. You got to look a certain way. You got to dress a certain way. You got to act a certain way. And I see that pressure that, a lot of these young folks, and in particular, a lot of my females are dealing with. And there's a great book by Grace Byers that says, I am enough. I am enough. And it's sort of like the previous book that I shared with you. But it's very, very important that we take the time, and learn these children and help to build these kids up. After I do my building up, then I start getting into the programs. But one of the things that I do, and I made the mistake of this when I was really getting started in this profession. And I'm going to be honest with you. When I first started this profession, you couldn't tell me nothing. I knew everything. And I had to fall in my behind a few times to realize you don't know everything. You need to step back and start listening, man. You do a whole lot of talking, but you don't do a whole lot of listening. And even that with my kids. I'll sit down and talk to my kids. Okay, I want to do some programs out here. Well, what's some of the things you want to do? Well, Mr. Ross, I want to learn about trees. I want to do some water quality testing. I want to do this. I want to do that. And that's what I do. I'll put stuff together that it's inclusive, that they had some involvement putting it together. I think I mentioned earlier here about the Lance Street learning project. And I grew up on Lant Street in Detroit, Michigan, right by the fairgrounds, the Michigan State Fairgrounds. Palmer Park was one of my learning institutes, and it was down the street. And one of my neighbors, I was actually in the neighborhood one time. I was just in the neighborhood, just kind of goofing off in my old lots over there where I was learning about, Phragmites and collecting butterflies. And Miss Ellaby came over and she said, "Bruce, I know you worked for the DNR, and I got kids over here, Bruce, that they're lost. And I really need you to come back over here and do something, help us, So I put together a program where kids ages 6 to 15 could learn about the great outdoors. And one of the things, we talk a lot about, okay, we need to get the kids that are, when I was growing up, a lot of vacant lots in the neighborhood. So what I did, I started bringing out tents. I had my little nature books, and we would go on the lots and stuff. And I would actually do some things with the kids in the neighborhood. We would talk about Phragmites. We would see a little pond of water, and we would do water samples. We would see what kind of bacteria was in that water. We also, like I mentioned earlier, we utilized Palmer Park and other parks such as Belle Isle, Rouge Park. We use those as classrooms. And I'm going to tell you this, ladies and gentlemen, in particular with COVID. The one thing I couldn't do with COVID, because I noticed a lot of programs were shutting down for these kids, and these kids had absolutely nothing to do. And yes, some of these kids were doing virtual learning, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. But I thought it was very important that we get these kids outdoors and let their minds just explore. And the parks, like I said, are just wonderful natural resource classrooms. And as I mentioned earlier, the kids were doing water samples and learning about tree species. But I have to thank one of my middle school teachers. Her name is Miss Milner, and she was my middle school teacher at Nolan Middle School in Detroit. And she had retired. And I had called her up and I said, I know we have COVID. She says, "Where do you want me?" And I told her about the Lant Street project that I had. And she came out and she brought some of her other science friends. And I know I had brought a couple of my friends who were in the natural resources that came out and talked to the kids about natural resources careers. But one thing that really hit me one day when we were doing one of our projects, this had to be close to about a month ago. And I had one of my kids, 9 years old, and he just couldn't think. You could tell something was wrong with him. And I went up to him and I asked him, I said, "What's going on?" And he said he was hungry. He said he didn't have anything to eat. And I said, we got to, excuse me. I said, we got to get you some food. And he said, my older brother, he can't really learn at home because he doesn't have a computer. We don't have Wi-Fi. So Ms. Milner and I started collecting food, and we feed the kids in the neighborhood, and we got computers donated because I found out one of the kids were going to McDonald's because McDonald's had Wi-Fi. And the people at McDonald's actually let him use the computers. And I apologize for my emotion, everyone, but this is real to me. This is not a game. This is very real to me. The other thing I like too, and at Palmer Park or Belle Isle or some of the other parks, I always have a little trivia for the kids, and I always want them to learn something, when we're out. And they don't see me do this, I might put a sign up on a tree, and this is one that I put up one day, what state has the most freshwater shoreline? And for all our natural people out there, I hope you know this answer now. Come on now, don't let me down. But what is funny with this is my younger kids, my little kids, they get this one every time. The bigger kids are looking at the younger kids like, "How did you know that?" What state has the most freshwater shoreline? It's Michigan, everybody. I know we all knew that. So the other thing that's very, very important to me, that whenever I teach a kid or want a kid to learn, I always make sure they have some print materials. The younger kids, I always make sure they have like a coloring book that they can actually learn about, healthy forces and growing cycle. One thing that's very, very, very important to me, that any print material that I give these kids, I want to make sure that someone in that book looked like the kids that I work with. When I talk about you can aspire to be a wildlife biologist or a forest technician, and they don't see anybody that look like them, they're gonna like, oh, well, I don't think this might be attainable for me. And that's why I make it very, very important. The other thing too is that I always try to leave kids with something that they can take and learn in their own backyard. And I have to thank Miss Milner for this. She had a friend at Barnes and Noble, and they had this wilderness fund for the Backyard Explorer. And she went out and got about 50 of these things donated. And I was just so impressed that she just one day surprised me. And we handed the kids this Backyard Explorer, and I'm kind of stealing from my dear friend Akima Price, What's Good in My Hood. She wrote this book, beautiful book. And we shared this with the kids. And this survival Backyard Explorer kit, it actually have like a little map of different kind of insects, different kind of butterflies, what kind of flowers you would find in your backyard. And the amazing thing is when I show up another day or another week, the kids want to talk about, well, Mr. Ross, in that little Backyard Explorer you gave me, this is what's in my backyard as well. And you see the look on those kids' face when, they're so excited when they have this and they learn from it, and I think I get more excited than they do. A program that's very, very near and dear to me is the Take One Community Program out of Pontiac, Michigan. And that's a partnership I have with an incredible young man. His name is Johannes Bowles. And Johannes, he's like me. He wears his heart on his sleeve, and he's all in it for the kids. But before COVID took place, we took some kids to the Michigan Department of Natural Resources Law Academy for conservation officers in Lansing, Michigan. And one of the reasons why I did this, I had an opportunity, like I said earlier, ask them, build it, and they'll come. I had an opportunity to talk to some of the kids from the Take One program out of Pontiac. And I asked them, what are some of the things you like in terms of careers and what have you? Well, a lot of them were telling me, I think I want to be a police officer. And then one of the young ladies said, well, Mr. Ross, are there police officers in the woods, or in forestry or in natural resources? And I'm like, yeah, we have conservation officers. And the light bulb went off, and I said, I'm going to contact my dear friends with the MDNR Law Academy. And they actually set up 2 days where my kids could come out and actually see officers in training at paints 1,000 words. And I have to thank he's an officer now, Officer Kemps, and I understood that he had been under the weather, and I really pray to God that he's okay. But he reached out to my two young men here, and he came up to them and he said, are you interested in being a conservation officer? And Alex right there with the white Superman pull over, he says, well, I don't know if I could be a conservation officer because I don't see anybody here that looks like me. And then he just said it just point blank. And Kemp said, you know what? Well, maybe you can change that. How can I help you change that? How can I help you become a conservation officer? And what I really, really like here, ladies and gentlemen, is how they're all talking here. And Alex actually is in the military right now. I think he's in the Marine Corps, but he's definitely thinking about being a conservation officer. And I know he had been in contact with Officer Camps there too. And again, I keep hitting this point home because this is the time that we're in right now, is that, we have to keep the lines of communication open, and we have to learn from each other, And as my mama always used to say, and I'm going to quote her, there's only one race out here, ladies and gentlemen, and that's the human race. But again, with the program, with the Take One Community Program, and I kind of stole from my Lance Street project, is that I work with ages from 5 to 12 years old in local parks in Pontiac. And Johannes Bowles and I, we work very, very closely to make sure that we have meals for the kids, because we do have kids that come to the program that are hungry. They haven't had anything to eat all day. And that's the one thing, and I know I bounce around here, but, it just, people don't realize when school's not in session, a lot of kids go to school to get that meal. And that's why we make sure that we have food for the kids. And we also, again, we make sure that we have computers and try to get Wi-Fi for these kids so they can actually virtually learn. And the other thing that we do, we introduce these kids to the Michigan State parks and other park systems, and we discuss the careers in the natural resources. I might have, a conservation officer. I might have someone from the DNR. I might have someone from the Detroit Recreation Department that comes out and talk to the kids about how they got involved in these careers. And the key in all this too, now you don't have to look like that child to care about that child. My mom used to say all the time. But one of the things that I really want to make sure that these kids actually have an opportunity to see someone that looked like them that's living their natural resources dream. I think that's very, very important. This is the photo of the kids at the Law Academy. And I just thought the Law Academy was really, really, really did a great job with the kids, and the kids really enjoyed it. And the gentleman in the blue suit on the far left-hand side, that's Johannes Bowles. And another project here that, again, is near and dear to me, and I promise you, I try not to cry. I know I'm a crier. It's the Greenfield Union Elementary Outdoor Reading and Learning Urban Library. And I had been going to Greenfield Union. Greenfield Union was about 5 blocks away from my house where I lived on Lance Street. I actually went to Grelin Elementary School, which was torn down, but Greenfield Union is actually still there. And when I was with the DNR, I would go up to the school and talk about what I do at the DNR, how I got involved in natural resources. I would bring books up to the kids on natural resources and careers in the natural resources. Really young kids, ages starting at 5 and all the way up to 11 years old. But what I found out about, was it last year, or was it last May, the kids put together a outdoor learning library. And unfortunately, some vandals destroyed the outdoor library. And I just saw the look on those kids' face, and I could just see that, they were really hurt. But one of the things I was concerned about, since that library got destroyed, will they continue to learn about natural resources, or will they move on to something else? And I was pretty adamant that we need to continue this going. So I met with the principal at the school, and I told her I might have access to some more books for the kids, and that we're going to really make a really, really nice library out here. And I have to thank a dear friend of mine. Her name is Ada Tacketts, and Ada Tacketts is with the MDNR forestry division, and she's also a forest fighter too. But Ada, I didn't realize this, told me she actually was an alumni of Greenfield Union. And I told her what had happened, and she works with a project called Project Learning Tree, where they actually get books and they educate teachers about teaching in the outdoors and how important natural resources teaching is. And Ada donated $1,000 for replenishing the books at Greenfield Union, and the kids were just so excited to see that. And these are some of the books on the picture here. And again, I'm making sure that we have books where the kids actually, look like the kids at the school. It's a camping trip and Ruby sleepover. And the next photo here is just some of the books. It's not all the books that were actually donated for the kids. And the kids actually also built a natural garden out there. And, they learn about, why it's important to have good gardens and why it's important to have healthy trees and what have you for oxygen. I think it's very important. And actually, I haven't been there in a while because school's been closed over there for a little bit. But every time I do go over there, the kids are always talking about, Mr. Ross, I think I could be a wildlife biologist. I think I could do this and I think I could do that. And what I think is really, really nice, and I didn't touch on this earlier, and I'm going to talk about the success stories, the kids that I've worked with who are now in college or skilled trades. There's one young man named David Sadler who he comes over to the schools. He's about 18 years old now. But, I'm a gray mule. I have gray hair now, and kids see me and it's like, oh, look at this old guy here. He's talking again. But when there's a kid close to their age that's talking to them and they're living their natural resources dream, I think it resonates. And another program that is definitely near and dear to me is a partnership with Help the Kids, Inc. It's called What's Good in My Hood Workforce Development Program. And I really, truly have to thank Miss Mariah Adams Lawton. She is an incredible shero. I mean, I learn from her every single day. Mariah and I met when I was helping to develop the Summer Youth Employment Program for the DNR, and she was one of the inaugural agencies. And I just so impressed by her. She took a closed down recreation center called Tyndall Activity Center off of Southern Mile in Wyoming and Detroit and reopened that center where they had ripped out all the pipes in the center, tore the gym floor out, and just her incredible dream and her incredible vision, they reopened the center, and this is where this program is actually housed. And I have to thank, quite a few sponsors here, but I just really want to thank Diversified Community Services for helping to fund this workforce development program, and also the Michigan Department of Natural Resources has helped. But one of the things that when I talk to my kids about careers in the outdoors and going to different places outdoors and working outdoors, one of the kids, he looked at me, he said, well, Mr. Ross, that's fine and dandy, but what about my neighborhood? My neighborhood is just, it's a mess. And that's why we started cleaning neighborhoods and helping to ensure a clean environment. And what we would do, and you can see this photo with the young man here, this is actually from 2 vacant lots that we cleaned out debris. And we noticed that in that vacant lot, some of the trees were dying because all this debris was around it. And actually this young man right here, he's thinking about becoming a forester, because what he noticed when he had cleaned these vacant lots, he noticed that the trees were becoming more healthier. And another part of this program too is, again, trying to reach this apple, to connect to this apple off the tree, is that we develop a What's Good in My Hood outdoor adventure camp for ages 5 through 12 through Healthy Kids Inc. And pretty much what we do with this program too is that we talk to the kids about the different careers. We do a lot of hands-on stuff with the kids, learning different tree species, learning about, what is an invasive species like Phragmites and what have you. And one thing I really liked, and Ms. Lawton was pretty adamant, is that, we want to have like a simulation of a camping experience right next to Tyndall. When we pitched tents and the kids pretend like they weren't pretending, they were actually camping. The kids were camping out and they really liked it. They were actually grilling hot dogs. They were telling camp stories, and this was all during the day. And I just thought it was so nice. And I had a few people come over and talk about the different careers that they're in right now. Had a forester come by. We had somebody from the Detroit Recreation Department come by and talk about what they're doing. Here's some other photos of what the kids are doing to keep their neighborhood clean. And they have ownership. They have ownership when they're doing this stuff. And again, I think kids learn by a lot of hands-on stuff. And I just don't put kids in a room and I sit up here and drone on and on about natural resources. This is what you can do. I believe in hands-on stuff, getting their hands dirty, getting their hands in the soil. The one photo on the cartoon photo is actually Mrs. Lawton. She is the outdoor adventure ranger, and she gets so into this. And like I said, she's one of my greatest heroes. This is before COVID, this photo here, and this kind of came from, again, sitting down, talking to these young folks about what do you like to do? What do you want to do outdoors? What are some of the things you want to do? And the kids said, Mr. Ross, I want to get out of the Detroit area. I want to go up to the UP. I've never been to the UP. So I reached out to the DNR, some of my friends from the DNR when I was field coordinator. We went up to Craig Lake State Park, thanks Doug Rich, the district supervisor up there. And he said, well, we can have the kids, work on trails and help to, rebuild some of the trails, help rebuild some of the boardwalks. Kids also at Craig Lake State Park planted over 125 trees. And they got an opportunity to talk to people who have careers in the DNR, from conservation officers, from wildlife biologists, foresters, fisheries technicians. And it really started to open these guys' eyes up and say, hey, you know what, Mr. Ross? It's possible. It's possible, Mr. Ross. And the last thing I will say too, not all my kids are going to go to college. I have quite a few of my kids are in skilled trades, and we need a whole lot of skilled trades people out here too. And just because you don't go to college don't mean you cannot be successful. So I really push the skilled trades track too. Now this is, probably gonna get me a little emotional again, but I really like talking about my success stories. And this is not an exhausted list of the kids I have in college or doing some things right now. But one of the reasons why I'm really pushing hard to have more kids doing the kind of stuff that I do, I know I can't go on forever. I know I can, and I don't, I don't intend to, but I know getting these young folks involved and doing the stuff that I'm doing, that I know these kids are going to be taken care of. The next generation of kids that come along, I'll be in my rocking chair, but I'll see these kids doing the. This is my dear friend and mentee, Brandon Hill. And Brandon Hill is actually a student at Michigan State University in the forestry department. And I met Brandon Hill through a program called Ecotech by Mr. Keith Young. And all these kids do is research, and they leave the country to do research. And Brandon, I was just so impressed with him. And he did a presentation. He called me up. He said, "Hey, Mr. Ross, and Mr. Young, Keith Young called me up and said, hey, Brandon's going to be at the Michigan State Extension Center in Detroit, and he's going to talk about some research he's done." And that photo here is what he was doing. And I just thought it was pretty heavy. His research topic was innovative ideas for detecting radioactive waste materials in rivers and streams to protect freshwater ecosystems. When I was his age, that was pretty heavy for me. I mean, it's pretty heavy for me now, but I was so impressed that he had all his backup information, and he did all the research, and he did all the data. And Brandon, he was a part of the Career Pathways program that I had talked about earlier, where the young man met the conservation officer. And what impressed me by Brandon, and no one asked him to do this, I never asked him to do this, but he brought his own research stuff. He was actually doing water quality testing at any river or any stream that he saw while we were in the Career Pathways program at the Ram Center. And he was doing like a comparison contrast of like waters and streams in the Detroit area, and he would compare the water quality. But he's definitely a hero, and I'm so proud of him. And I know he's the first one in his family to go to college. And I know I mentioned this young man earlier, is David Sattler, excuse me. I met David about 8 years ago, and he was actually one of my kids that I kind of got involved in some natural resources. And I used to give him books and what have you. But David is one of my ambassadors. David, he comes back and he talks to the kids. He comes over to the Land Street Project and he talks to the kids about what he's doing. David was actually a student at Randolph Career Technical Center in Detroit. And he was actually in skilled trades. But I got him involved in the DNR Career Pathways program and a few other programs. And he started thinking, he said, well, Mr. Ross, maybe I want to go to college and think about, doing something, in terms of natural resources. And now he's a student at Eastern Michigan University, majoring in civil engineering. And one of the things that he wants to do, he wants to rebuild his city. He wants to rebuild Detroit. But one of the things I really respect him is that he's a hero to the kids. The kids they sit on his lap and they ask him, well, David, what are you doing? How are you doing this? And when the kids are doing like their little research project, David's the guy, I call him Professor David. They all come to him, and I can kind of sit over there off to the side and just watch David go. Young lady is Keisha Flowers. She's my conservation advocate. She's always talking about conservation law and how we can get people to obey the law in terms of natural resources. This is when we were at the Law Academy, and I really want to thank the two female conservation officers who came up to her and talked to her. They came up to her and talked to her and said, you ever considered, going to be a conservation officer? She says, I don't know, I'm really into agricultural. But, they sat down, they talked, and they hung around her the whole time. And I think she did exchange information with the two conservation officers there. She's at Tennessee State University, majoring in agricultural science. I say this every single day to my kids, and I'm pretty adamant when, I talk to my kids. You have to be the change you want to see in the world, because it starts with you. It starts with all of us. And again, what I always try to do every single day is I try to build my kids up. And I try to teach my kids that the impossible is possible. And that's what I do every single day, ladies and gentlemen, is try to lift my kids up. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Bruce. That was really, really amazing. I've known you for 3 years. I had no idea that you were up to that much work. Just doing phenomenal work across the city of Detroit and across the state. So thank you for all of your work and all
Thank
the
you.
lives that you have impacted along the way.
Yeah, sorry I got a little emotional.
No, that made it even more good. All right, so we have a couple minutes left over, actually quite a few. So we're going to use the time to just open the floor for any questions that anyone may have for Bruce. So at this point, I'm going to invite you to maybe just share a question you may have with us in the chat, or you can feel free to sort of jump in and ask a question verbally if you'd like. Bruce, I see a question in the chat box from Artina, I'm sorry, who says, great presentation. How can the Metro Park support your efforts?
Yeah, I actually, I know Amy McMillan. I used to work with Amy McMillan in Ypsilanti, and Amy's always been an advocate for this kind of work. And, one of the things that we really need is that we need more venues for the kids to come out and get a chance to talk to or virtually talk to, because I know COVID and everything, but have an opportunity to talk to professionals, in this field, and how do they get involved? What is their story? And the other thing too is some printed materials. I know the Metro Parks has a really nice pamphlet on the history of the Metro Parks, and I think it's very important that the kids could maybe get some of that printed material.
Thanks, Bruce. Anyone else have a question for Bruce?
I have a question, if I may. This is Terry Sherrick. Bruce, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. How you doing, Terry?
Fine. How are you?
Pretty good, sir.
I'm in my garden planting clothes, so I'm not showing myself. So anyhow, I've been the business of cultural heritage. As you know, Native Americans are really working hard to reclaim their culture and bring that cultural perspective
Q&A time.
into sort of a Western science perspective, so that they talk
By
about.
the time I take a bite.
Are you still there?
Yeah, I kind of heard something was kind of jurgling there. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So they talk a lot about indigenous ways of knowing and doing and being, and contrast that with sort of the Western European, Western science perspective. Do you think that there's anything in terms of African Americans? Is there something, do you feel, that about the African perspective that African Americans can bring to natural resources that is perhaps different from other perspectives, and that we would benefit from having that perspective, that going back to those roots? Do you think there's something there?
It's funny you mentioned that. I have a dear friend of mine, a mentor. Her name is Geraldine Jackson. And I remember when I was, up and coming, and she would always talk about Ethiopia and, how they were so attached to the soil and how they were raising yams and all that. And she would always give us that perspective. And I think it's merit. There's a lot of merit in that. And I think you really have to have the people that know that history and know how to talk about that history. And I think there's a lot of validity to that. And, it's funny you mentioned that too. I was going to bring Miss Jackson. She's retired now, but she's always interested in talking about that perspective. I'm going to have her get more involved with some of my programs, in particular Lent Street projects. She could start talking a little bit more about the Ethiopia history and culture as related to the natural resources in the land.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome, sir.
Bruce, we have a question in the chat from Dan Finnegan, who asked, do you have any advice on connecting young people in Detroit to eco experiences? Dan says they work at a nonprofit on the East Side and would love to plan some experiences for the summer ahead.
Yeah, I think one of the things too, and I would really like to share my information or get his information, because there's some organizations that I think I can connect him with. And I think the thing is, a lot of folks don't realize there are quite a few Detroit-based organizations that what they do. They want to connect with other organizations that are doing that certain things, and they just don't know how. They don't know who to reach out to. And I just think it's important that, we share that information and get those resources, what I call people resources or bodies, to folks who really want to do those things. And I think to answer your question too, it's about connecting those dots. And I would really like to exchange information with you, and maybe I can help you out in that arena.
Awesome. Dan shared his information in the chat box, and Bruce, I'll make sure to write it down and forward that to you after today's meeting.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Bruce?
I have a question. This is John Robinson from Turnaround Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
And I work for, of course, a nonprofit that kind of specializes in basically people that have come and have a background, some very serious backgrounds. So wondering if these are some possible opportunities, because again, it's challenging to find them some employment. And I have talked to a lot of people and found out they have some interest. I was surprised at being outside and working with their hands. And so this sounds like a great opportunity that we don't have a lot of here, to be honest with you.
I couldn't hear on the last part. You were kind of, on my end, you were breaking up a little bit. I really apologize, because I hate to have you repeat that, but I didn't get the last part that you were saying, sir.
No problem. I can certainly repeat that. And I was just wondering, in terms of opportunities, in terms of, again, like I said, I deal with a population of a lot of young people, anyway from 18 to 65, basically, with some background challenges and some, so just wondering if there's some actually employment opportunities for some of these folks to be dealing, getting. I know this sounds like a lot of education in terms of what you're doing, but just wondering if there's some employment opportunities for some of our participants.
Yeah, I heard it all this time. I work very closely with an organization called Greening of Detroit. And a lot of the folks that, I'm not going to say a lot of, but some of the folks they deal with have had some challenges. And I have connected the dots with some folks to them, and they have helped them out. And maybe this could be, an opportunity for some of your folks, because I believe in, sharing resources, connecting dots. We're all in this together. So I would love to get your information, and maybe I can help you out with that.
No problem. I'll make sure you get it.
Thank you, sir.
Bruce, we have another question for you in the chat. And this one comes from Herman Jenkins, who asks, do you have any programs that explore woody debris management in rivers like the Rouge? Herman is with Friends of the Rouge.
I specifically don't, but I know Garrett Dempsey, Detroit Outdoors, and I know they do a lot of work relative to that too. And Garrett would be a good contact. I might not do everything, but I knew people who kind of fill those gaps. And, Garrett Dempsey would definitely be one that I could connect you with.
Thanks, Bruce. And in terms of connection, Jody from the Detroit River International, Wildlife Refuge says to feel free to share her contact information with anyone who may be interested in visiting the refuge in Trenton. She says our new park rangers are also available to go to other locations to meet youth where they are already located. So that may be of help for what you're doing or for others on the call today.
Thanks, Jody.
And Bruce, would you mind verbally sharing your contact information with folks who may be interested in following up with you?
Yeah, I hope everyone has their computers or pen ready. I'll give you my phone number. My phone number is 313-215-2279. My email address is Bruce, BRUCE, J.Ross@yahoo.com.
And I'd like to just take a minute, just an additional minute, to just open the floor again for anybody else who may have a question for Bruce in this time. All right. So I think with that, if you all can join me one more time in giving Bruce a warm round of applause. Bruce, thank you so much for an engaging talk and for your time this afternoon, and then more broadly for all the awesome work you're doing in Detroit and beyond. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bruce.
Thank you. Hi, Lisa.
Hey.
Appreciate your time, Bruce.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Bruce. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
See you soon, Bruce.
All right. See ya.